All right, welcome to the Go Forward Lounge. I am DJ Butler, Arc Press Senior Editor. Come on in out of the rain. Before we get started with the conversation, I want to invite you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, go to arc.press and sign up for our mailing list. Follow us at arc_press on X, all of the standard requests. I'm excited to be here today with my friend Ben Yalow. I know Ben from fandom. I'm not sure. I was thinking a minute ago, Ben, I don't remember exactly. I know you and I have been at I, probably 20 or 30 cons together. But certainly I've been to every Dragon Con for the last 8 years, and I've been to every Liberty Con for the last 8 years. And I was at Renovation, and I was at Sasquan, and I was at Worldcon in Kansas City. Um, and maybe not 20 or 30, but I don't remember which one I met you at. Probably it's no later than probably was no later than Sasquan. I'm not sure about that though.
Yeah, I suspected probably it was at some Bain thing where we were
Yep,
both at and Tony introduced us
yep.
because
And that
Tony
was
and I have known each other since she was a kid.
yeah. Um, by way of introduction, Ben is a longtime capital F fan, a longtime fan. Has been active in fandom since 1971. He's attended over 50 Worldcons. I think, and maybe you can confirm this. I think you and Robert Silverberg are probably about the most attendingest Worldcon participants there can be.
Right, and Silverberg long predates me.
Yeah. So he's six.
Silverberg goes back to the 50s.
Yeah. Okay. Um, but still, you must be near the record holder. 50 World Cons is most of them. So fantastic. 900 more or less total conventions, about a third of which you helped operate, making you one of the secret masters of fandom. And we recently posted a long interview where the ARC editors talked about various things, including a little bit about Worldcon, and wanted to bring you on, Ben, and talk more about Worldcon. What is it? Some of the history, some of your experiences, some of the things that you've seen over time. So welcome to the lounge. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you. Um, let's try and put Worldcon quickly into perspective. Conventions There's an argument about when conventions started, with a split between the US and the UK, roughly.
Mm,
The reason for that is that the first convention that was announced was in the UK in Leeds in 1937. However, a bunch of New York and Philadelphia fans got together, arranged for a bunch of the New York fans to come down to Philadelphia. They met and they held a business meeting at which they decided that makes this a convention and we should hold more of them. So this was in 36. So you can say Leeds was announced first, and Leeds was planned as a convention, whereas Philadelphia, well, technically it was a convention and it happened first, but it didn't start out as a convention really.
yeah,
So you can make arguments both ways.
yeah.
Um,
So 1936. I mean, we're talking about fairly young Isaac Asimov and Donald Walheim, right? And like who are the players around this time? And science fiction is mostly published in magazines. It's a
Science
pretty
fiction is
different.
entirely published in magazines.
Yeah.
Which is how fandom was able to start. Because Amazing, which was the first All SF magazine, which started in 1926. Um, Amazing in the letter column. And boy, is that different now. In the letter column, they printed the names and addresses of the contributors.
Wow.
All the people who wrote into the letter column, their addresses were there, which means that you now had a mailing list of other people interested. So you could start to found clubs and
Wow.
fanzines and all of those things.
Oh, how interesting.
So we had the Philadelphia Convention in 36, and we had a few more conventions on and off over the next few years. And people decided to hold a big convention that would encompass all of fandom.
Mm.
Uh, and they wanted to call it the World's Fair Convention because it was going to be held in conjunction with the World's Fair in 1939 in New York City. World's Fair is a trademark, and boy, do those people enforce that trademark. So they sort of told this bunch of teenage kids in New York, no, you can't use that trademark. So they called it the World Science Fiction Convention. Um,
And what's the perceived need that they're trying to meet? Is it social? Is it hey, I really want to meet other people who like this stuff I like
it's meet the other people I've been corresponding with.
because their addresses were in the letters
Right,
columns and you would just start sending out a fanzine or writing someone and saying,
exactly,
Angela, I read your letter in June of 35 and I thought it was a great.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you had fanzines, you had clubs starting to form. Uh, they actively, uh, amazing, essentially sponsored an organization called the Science Fiction League, which had chapters in lots and lots of cities, of which two are still left. Uh,
Wow.
PISFAS, the Philadelphia Science Fiction Society, and LOSFAS, Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society, were both
Interesting.
founded as chapters of the Science Fiction League.
Oh, that's fantastic. So what did amazing sponsorship mean? Did that just mean they would like list you in the magazine
They
as a
would list
chapter?
you, and there was no money involved.
Right.
There's never any money involved. Um, so after a bunch of these regional conventions, uh, people said, well, let's hold this big thing that would bring in people from all over the place. Well, I mean, all over the place. I think in the end, there were something like two came in from Los Angeles. I mean,
Yeah.
not a lot of all over the place.
Travel was relatively pretty expensive.
Uh, yeah. And especially because in many cases, kids didn't have cars.
Hmm.
And trains were really expensive. And in 1939, don't even think about flying.
Yeah.
Um, so they selected a chair
Hmm.
and planned everything.
And did he say, was this in New York, right? We're
This
talking
is
about
New
Worldcon
York.
1? Yeah.
Uh, then fandom has had contentious situations for quite a while. Uh, at an intermediate business meeting, one of the competing fan groups packed the meeting, threw out the chair, elected a new chair to the convention, which is why Sam Moskowitz is the chair of the first Worldcon and not Don Walheim.
Yep.
uh, who was originally selected to be chair of that convention. But an intermediate business meeting voted, as they were voting on more structure, they changed it to Sam. So in 1939, we held the very first World World Convention, not World's Fair Convention, World Convention. A couple of hundred people, and everybody said, "What a great idea!" And let's hold another one next year. And the next year was Chicago in 40, Denver in 41. And at Denver, they elected to hold the next Worldcon in LA in 42. Then there was this Pearl Harbor thing, and there were no Worldcons from
Mm.
40, essentially from 42 through 45. There were no Worldcons.
Mm. Mm.
But then they resumed and held the 46th Worldcon in LA.
Yeah.
And the Worldcon has been held every year since, although the 2020 Worldcon, which was scheduled to be in New Zealand, was virtual because
Mm.
COVID, New Zealand was locked down.
Yep. So this is interesting. So let me extrapolate a couple of points because I think this really helps sort of set up what is Worldcon even today, right? Because it's easy to imagine in the 30s and into the 40s, we're talking about hundreds of people, like a number like 300, 400 people.
Right.
And they're people who, um, are interested in a sort of um, a fringe kind of literature, right? I mean, science fiction is much more mainstream now than it was in the 30s and 40s. I don't think the word nerd maybe was being used, but a small literature. They were enthusiasts for something
I
not
mean,
everybody
the,
loved.
the, the, the saying was, it is a proud and lonely thing to be a fan.
Yeah.
Because, and in fact, when they first started having uh, academics looking at science fiction, you had, I'm not, I wasn't there, but a very well-known SF editor was quoted as having said, uh, let's get SF out of the classroom and back into the gutter where it belongs.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So this is probably other conventions too, right? I mean, again, just context because just as a reminder to maybe really young viewers, even long distance phone calls are quite expensive. I mean, in my
Long
youth,
distance phone calls? No, phone calls.
phone
Phone
calls
calls.
were expensive. That's right.
I was living in New York.
Yeah,
If I called my uncle in Brooklyn,
yeah,
still inside New York City boundaries, there was a per minute charge.
yeah. Yeah. So these are people who are friends and they share have a lot of passion for a thing that not everyone loves, right? And I get to see my friends, which is a small group, once a year. I can write letters to them, right? That's pretty affordable.
You can interchange fanzines.
Yeah.
That's the primary method of communication.
Okay, interesting. So I have my list and I send my fanzine out 4 times a year or once a month or something, and I get fanzines from other people. And they're saying, I read the new, Heinlein or whatever, or I thought Amazing Number 72 was pretty boring. Um, but then you get to see each other once a year. Uh,
Right. or you can see them at your local convention if you're living in a place where there is a local convention.
Yeah, and they're also close to you. If it's, you're
Right,
both in New York or both in Philadelphia or something.
right. So we start seeing conventions happening. You see Westercon starting in 1948
Hmm.
to deal with the fact that, well, there's a lot of space out on the West Coast and not a
Yeah,
lot of conventions
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And even if there's a convention in Denver, LA is a long distance from Denver.
Yep.
So they
And
started WesterCon to deal with the fact that when the Worldcon wasn't out west,
yep.
to have a convention there.
And these are events. I mean, you mentioned Donald Walheim had been elected president of Worldcon one, and my memory, I threw out Asimov's name. My memory is he was one of the ones who
He
was
was one of the
appointed to.
Futurians as well.
Yeah, one of because one of those two factions when they split. Um,
More factions, more factions. This is New York fandom, more factions.
More factions. One of the factions. Yeah. So from the beginning, it's not just the readers, it's not just the consumers. You have writers and maybe editors and artists also.
Remember that SF is a small enough, new enough field that most of the writers at the time had started out as fans.
Yeah.
You know, Asimov was a fan. Uh, Hal Clement is the only person that I know of who was both a Worldcon fan guest of honor and professional guest of honor,
Mm.
because he was a member of the Stranger Club, which was the club in Boston in the 30s and 40s. So when the Worldcon was in Boston, the Stranger Club one year. The Stranger Club was fan guest of honor, and Hal was also, obviously, as the person who more than anyone else can be argued as the exemplar of hard SF. He was honored as a Worldcon professional guest of honor.
Mm.
Um, but the field was small enough so that, except small enough and new enough, that essentially everybody came up through fandom,
Mhm.
except for, the real old timers,
Mm.
you know, Murray Leinster, Ed Hamilton, of course, Jack Williamson.
Mhm.
They were writing before Amazing even came out.
Yeah.
Um,
And is this true of the artists too? If you go to a Worldcon now, you'll see there'll be an art room and you'll have art
the
guests of
artists
honor
were the artists were, again, everybody was a if you didn't predate fandom, you almost certainly grew up in fandom,
in fandom. Yeah.
um, because fan artists, I mean, fanzines could always use more art. There's always room for more art. So you end up with fan artists, and some of them are good enough that they get hired professionally.
Mhm.
Not everybody came up that way, but many of them certainly did.
Yeah.
And in addition, uh, if you didn't start out as a fan artist, um, as I say, fandom doesn't have money. Fan artists don't get paid. But you had professional artists who ended up, they would do artwork and send it off to fanzines. So that, for example, in 1967, Jack Gaughan, who was one of the premier professional artists at the time, was sending off tons of artwork to fanzines, and it was brilliant artwork. and ended up winning both the best professional and best fan artist Yugos in the
Yeah.
same year because he was doing both professional artwork and fan artwork.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, I think this, I haven't been to a Worldcon in a few years now, but I think it's still the case that there are Hugos for fan work as well as,
Correct.
like in the writing as well as in the art space.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh, and sometimes a prof a fan somebody who is best known for his fan writing ends up doing some professional writing and might win a Hugo in the professional categories.
Yeah.
Certainly, you've had people who were better known as professionals. As I said, Jack Gaughan, uh, Bob Silverberg won a fan writing Hugo.
Mm.
I mean, that kind of crossover is still there.
Yeah.
And it was even more there in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. So you start attending, you were not there in 1937. You start attending in World in 1963, is that right? That you're
No, I started attending in 71.
Oh, in 71. Okay. Okay. That's right. Sorry, you told me in yeah. But when we were talking about what to discuss in advance of recording here, um, you suggested that we could talk about the changes between Discon 1 in 1963. This is where I got confused. And Discon 2 in 1974. It feels like we've kind of set up the picture pre-1963, right? Is there anything else we need to add? There's this, I think it's actually very lovely, right? I have so much, Ben, I have so much affection for um anybody who is a small group of people who just want to share the thing they love, uh, and aren't doing it for the money. They're doing it because they love it, and that just sounds wonderful. Um, is there anything we're sort of missing in that picture pre-1963? Here's a question: when do we start seeing world cons outside of the U.S.?
Um, Outside of the US, it's easy.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's pretty early because we go to Toronto in
Uh,
1948.
oh, okay. Yep.
Um, we don't go overseas until we go over to London in 57.
Okay.
We don't go to Australia until 75,
Yeah.
which is the furthest away that I'd have to check whether Chengdu or Melbourne are further from the US.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
both pretty far away.
Yeah. I think that's fair. So that London, that's an interesting. Toronto, yeah, fair enough. That's not fundamentally all that far from New York or Philadelphia, right? It's
Right, but there was a very, very active British fandom.
so this is
As I
interesting
say, going back, go, they can legitimately claim to have held the first convention in
in Leeds. Yeah.
Leeds. Uh,
It's
Now,
so interesting. Are they
much
reading the same magazines or is it a whole different set of magazines?
in those days, what they're getting is UK editions of the American magazines.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of common literature available. And of course, fanzines can cross the Atlantic and do.
Yeah.
Um, So there's a lot of communication across the Atlantic, not in person, of course, because it's frightfully expensive to cross the Atlantic.
Yeah.
But fanzines are crossing all the time. So the Worldcon is slowly growing. I mean, we start out at a couple of hundred. By the time you get to DC, you're at 600, which is a largish Worldcon, but that's because the Northeast is full of active clubs and things like that.
Mhm.
You've got the DC club, you've got the Philadelphia club, you've got the New York club. You've actually got several New York clubs, but you've got a New York convention. You've got a Boston convention. You've got a bunch of conventions in the Northeast. So it's easy to get a huge, huge
Mm.
Worldcon, 600 people.
And is that easier? So is it easier in the East at this time than in the West because there's just more people, or is science fiction also kind of caught on more in the Northeast?
There's more centers. I
Yeah,
mean, and the centers are close together. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
from New York, it's 200 miles north to Boston. It's 100 miles to Philadelphia,
right.
another 100 and change miles down to DC.
Yeah. Whereas from Salt Lake, within 200 miles, there's not another city of comparable size, even today, right? Las Vegas is 380 or something, and that's the closest. So,
Right.
yeah.
So it's easier to get a bunch of different people in different clubs together in the Northeast
Mm,
because the distances are tiny. And conventions are generally held downtown, which means you don't need a car. You can take trains because there are
mm,
trains every place in the Northeast.
hmm.
And it's only a few hours on the train from
Yeah,
one city to another.
that's interesting.
So you've now got DisCon,
Yeah, 1963.
1963. The first thing is that fandom is essentially 90% male.
Mm,
Um, because the science fiction reading populace is mostly teenage boys, or at least they start out as teenage boys and
yeah,
keep reading the stuff because they love it.
stay teenage boys inside maybe as they become stockbrokers and chemistry professors.
Exactly. Um, so the Worldcon is overwhelmingly male. In fact, conventions are overwhelmingly male. If you look at, there's a photo online of the banquet because Yugos, once the Yugos got invented, which is a decade earlier, um, the Yugos were given out at a banquet.
Mm,
Now then, not everybody could afford the banquet because it's expensive. Prices are very different in those days, but I mean, the discon hotel rooms were $9 a night
yeah.
at a relatively upscale hotel. It was at the Statler Hilton in DC.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. And you already paid for a train ticket to get there, and you have a hotel for 3 or 4 nights. So
right.
it adds up.
It adds up. So not everybody could go to the banquet,
Yeah.
but they would let people in after the banquet
Yeah.
for the speeches where they would give out the Hugos.
Yeah. Now the Hugo, this is just a side, I'm just thinking out loud. The Hugos are named after Hugo Gernsback, who was a publisher.
Who was the public? He was the founder of Amazing Stories.
Yeah.
So
And were those named for him posthumously? I don't remember when he
no,
died.
no,
So
no, it
he
was.
okay. So was he actually on the scene in 1963?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, so you've got an overwhelmingly male population. The convention is shorter. It's held Labor Day weekend.
Interesting.
Um, Conventions tend to get held on rotten weekends, and because we're cheap, we can't afford. We're paying out of our own pockets. We don't have a corporation that's sending us to these conventions.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of income. Um, so you've got the convention held on Labor Day weekend, and it's a Saturday, Sunday, Monday convention.
Hmm.
The other thing that is very, very different from modern conventions is that there is a single track of program.
Mm.
Multi-track program doesn't get invented. It first gets invented in 1970 and really doesn't become overwhelmingly popular for many, many years afterwards.
Interesting. So there's one auditorium room, and there's just
Right.
programming in that room for the
Well, actually, there are two rooms.
okay.
There's one room where the program takes place, but
Mm.
then you need another separate room for the banquet
Okay. Yep.
because you can fit a lot more chairs in a room when all you've got to do is line up rows and rows of chairs.
Yeah.
If you've got to have these giant round tables, the capacity of the room is noticeably smaller.
Yeah.
So you've got the room where the banquet is held, and that's essentially in use for the banquet. But the entire program is in one room because there is no other program.
Interesting.
And you don't even have fixed time slots or anything like that. If you look at the program in 63, you have a James Blish program that starts at 12:45. The next program item starts at 1:30 with Bob Silverberg and Ed Emschwiller. The next program item starts at 2.
Mm.
The next program item starts at 2:30. The next item's at 3:15.
That so someone's just saying, well, that sounds like a 45-minute conversation. I think that's a half-hour conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And since you're dealing with a single track of program, you don't have to make sure that the program in rooms A, B, C, D, and E all end at the same time so you
right.
can switch around. No, you say, this program item looks like it should take about such.
Yeah, yeah. And make sure the panel, when the panelists show up for the next one, they can go up and start.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a guy named Kevin Trainer out in the Las Vegas area who um he's about 3 years into trying to start an old style con. I think there used to be a con called SilverCon that went defunct.
SilverCon, I believe Sarah Hoyt used to go to SilverCon.
I think that's right. So in fact, she was so his the sort of successor convention or heir is he calls it Son of SilverCon. And I was able to go to the first one. And Yeah, I mean there it was very small. He's just starting up. It was all in one room, and you just kind of you transitioned from one conversation to the next conversation based on what the program said, right? But it was all in one space, so it didn't have to be regimented.
Exactly. So you're dealing with a single thread of program. Um, there's obviously a wealth of people available to put onto the program because you don't have a ton of program slots. And you've got essentially everybody who is everybody in the field is there. Um, so it's it's really easy to fill out the program because, oh boy, you've got your choice of who you want.
Yeah. Now, by 63, let's see, are we starting to get this is pre-Star Trek, which is the end of the 60s, right? So is
Right.
we're starting, well, maybe it's a little early for us to have sort of science fiction film or TV stars.
You don't have film or TV stars
Yeah,
there, um, because you're right. I mean, this is not the we don't we don't have we don't have a lot of media.
yeah.
Um, I mean, if you look at the Hugo ballot, uh, yes, there is a media category.
Hmm.
Um, the best dramatic production category, and nothing nothing is really particularly formalized. You ended up with a grand total of three entries in best dramatic production.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, you don't have media there.
yeah. So at this point, it's writers and it's visual artists
Writers and visual artists
and
and editors, of course, the
and
play-by-play
editors.
editors.
Yeah, yeah, they're okay. And Filk, right? Filk goes back to is it 1959 or something? Filk is about this time.
Filk is starting up.
Yeah.
Um, and but that's not on the program. That's
Mm,
in the hallways.
hmm.
That's runs at parties and out in the convention halls and things like that.
Yeah.
But nothing formal there on the program.
Yeah. It's just to sort of, I mean, I'm sort of repeating myself really, but you can see the roots of like the desire to have lots of parties in hotel rooms and in the halls around, where these are friends that really you mostly get to see. Some of them you only see them once a year, right?
If that,
Yeah. And so you're
if
not going to,
Worldcon is far away, if the
right.
Worldcon is in DC, there's a whole bunch of your friends in the hospice who can't afford to come
Yep. Right.
all the way across the country.
Right. Right. Yeah. So of course you have a sort of a tradition of room parties and hanging out in the hallways, a bunch of social activity around the
Right.
formal program.
And organizations like the N3F, uh,
Hmm.
they have an open hospitality room, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but that's really very much what the early conventions were like. They could continue to grow, but you're still looking at a few hundred. Then, as you pointed out, Star Trek hits.
I wondered if that was going to be a factor in the story.
Boy, is it a factor in the story. You know, Star Trek, there's a promotion of it at the Worldcon in '66, but it hits it hits for real in '67. The '67 Worldcon masquerade is full of Spocks. Um, Deborah Langsam edits the first Star Trek media zine. Well, the
Mm.
very first media zine, and she hands out copies of it.
And that's a fanzine. That's
It's
her
a
production.
fan, it's a fanzine called Spockenalia,
That's funny.
and she's handing it out at the Worldcon. Now, this doesn't mean that various professionals don't end up writing for Spockenalia. I mean, the Andersons, Poole and Karen end up writing, uh, or fans who later would become uh, professionals, like Lois McMaster is writing
Mm.
for. Uh, yeah, later on she became Lois McMaster Bujold and a major professional. But no, at the time she's a fan
Mm.
and not a professional writer. And she's got stuff in Spockenalia.
That's probably some, I mean, it might be among her earliest published stuff, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Um, you know, I keep on referencing a lot of these things. Let me sort of right now mention the FANAC site, fanac.org
Mm.
is the biggest archive of our history around. Uh, Photos, publications. Um, for Discon 1, they have a photo album, including a photo of the banquet. And if you look at the banquet, you see nothing but an occasional woman, but you see mostly men in suits and ties.
Oh, and suits and ties, of course.
Of course. The program book is online. The Hugo nomination ballot and the Hugo ballot are online. J.K. Klein, who was a well-known photographer, put out a fanzine with articles from lots of people analyzing the convention and thousands of photos uh, captioned as best he could.
Hmm. So the ballot or the list of finalists. I mean, the Hugo organ. If you were part of the team, volunteer organizing a Worldcon in Philadelphia or whatever your town, presumably you must have also basically had a fanzine type sort of publication that you would send out and say, "Hey, we're 9 months out, we're 6 months," and at some point, that's where you announce the finalists, right? We're 6 weeks out. Look forward to seeing you all.
Right, you've got a, you've
Here are the
got
finalists.
you've got progress reports that you send out to all your members.
Yeah,
You can't email them or tell them to look on the web. No, you're sending out physical
yeah.
progress reports. And those progress reports are online at the FanX site if you want to take a look at them. Um, so suddenly we've got an explosion. Um, because at a time when the first the first Trek Con is in January of 72. I'm not going to go into the history of that. That's an entirely separate discussion, uh, which should be coming out. I've already recorded a whole bunch of that history. We just have to edit it. But the first one comes out in 72,
Mhm.
and there's 3,500 people there at a time when the Worldcon in 71 was 2,000.
Mm. Wow.
Um,
And 2000 is already significantly up. I mean, that's tripling in size from a decade earlier, right?
right. What we have is we slowly grow to 1,000 people in 67.
Yeah.
Then we slowly grow to 2,000 in
Mm.
71.
Yeah.
But then we hold the first Star Trek convention and we have 3,500 people. And the sex ratio is very different.
Interesting.
The sex ratio is overwhelmingly female.
That is interesting. Now, is that people who want to be Uhura or people who have, or is it women who are interested in Shatner and Nimoy, basically?
An awful lot of the latter.
Yeah. Yeah. How interesting.
So, what's going to happen in the intervening years from 72 on is that many of the people who come in through the Star Trek conventions, particularly since the early Star Trek conventions, were very much like SF conventions, except for the fact that we had a bit more Star Trek programming
Hmm.
than would be normal at a regular SF convention.
Yeah.
But would be perfectly reasonable, to have a speech by Shatner
Hmm.
followed by a speech by Isaac Asimov. Uh,
Hmm.
they really were science fiction conventions.
Interesting. Interesting. And they're being organized. This is still all fan stuff. This is not Paramount or somebody, CBS.
No,
This is, yeah.
no. I mean, I was I was a gopher at that first Star Trek convention.
Fun.
It was put on by the people who put on Lunacon,
Hmm.
which was the New York area convention.
Yeah.
So we start to see a huge change in the demographics. We get a huge influx of people, and many of them are women. So fandom's demographics change incredibly because we're now no longer 90% male.
Yeah.
We get to be still around 60% male,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the 50, 60 numbers like that, pretty much you're now sort of a very mixed demographic.
Yeah.
And since in the 90% days, most, certainly not all, but most of the women were girlfriends of the men going there or
Mm.
wives or whatever. You also end up with a lot more independent women going to conventions.
Mhm.
Now, we'd always had independent women going to conventions,
Sure.
but there were suddenly a lot more of them.
Yeah.
So the demographics were massively changing.
Yeah. Interesting. Does does is Star Trek also a factor in the popularization of cosplay? Does that sort of the same, does that come in kind of in a similar time frame?
No, cosplay started early.
Did
Uh,
it? Okay.
a well-known Los Angeles fan, Forrest J. Ackerman,
Oh yeah.
uh, was at the first Worldcon in '39 in costume.
You know what? I knew that and I forgot. Um, what was his costume? I have forgotten this episode.
I've seen it, it's harder to describe,
Yeah. Okay. Fair
but
enough.
uh, now we are in the middle of some changes in costuming. Uh,
Mm. Yeah.
among other things, this was the late 60s, early
Mm.
70s, which meant that the current costuming rule of no costume is no costume was not completely in effect. It was okay to have topless women, for example.
Yep.
Right now, that rule has been in effect. No, you can't get away with that now.
Yep.
But for a number of years in the late 60s, early 70s, you could. And if you go to the Fanac site and look at the photos of the masquerade in 74,
Mm.
you will see some topless women in in the photos from the masquerade.
Yeah.
Um, the masquerade also is using live mics. Right now, at most masquerades, everything is pre-recorded.
Mm.
Uh, in those days, no, there was a live mic, usually stage center, and the people spoke at the live mic. So
Yeah.
I mean, the technology was very different at the time.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that did not change between 63 and 74 was the organization of the convention.
Okay.
Um, Basically, it was run by a local club, and you had maybe a few dozen departments, and they all reported to the chair. And all of the hierarchical structures and things like that you see at a modern large convention,
Yeah.
uh, you didn't see then.
Hmm.
The modern hierarchy with division heads and things like that was not going to get invented for another half decade.
Hmm. So this might have been, you say the same, the organization was the same. We're talking about two conventions in the same city a decade apart. It may have been many of the same individuals, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, and again, talking about crossing the line between pro and fan, the parliamentarian of the Worldcon business meeting in 74 was the person who had, in fact, chaired the convention in 63
Hmm.
and who would later go on to have a fairly major professional career, George Sithers,
Hmm. Okay.
who later was editor at Asimov's for ages.
Yeah.
So, yes, you'll see a significant number of names on both the 63 and 74 committees, uh,
Yeah.
mostly from the DC area. Um, I mean, 74 got a little bit more complicated because Jay and Alice Haldeman, who were the ones who were living in DC and were co-chairing the convention, moved down to Florida
Hmm.
for the convention. So Ron Bounds, who was the vice chair of the convention, effectively became the co-chair. And remember, as I say, that boundary line between fan and pro, the Jay Haldeman, who I refer to as the chair of Discon 2, is Jack C. Haldeman, brother of Joe Haldeman, and
Hmm.
author of a few novels, but better
Yep.
known for, I think he had something like 70, 70 plus short stories.
Yeah. Yep. That sounds right.
So, was he a giant author? No. Was he a significant author? Yeah, I think any author who has 70 short stories out counts as a significant author.
Yeah.
And he had been writing since the early 70s, so he didn't have a lot of work out, but he had a bunch of professional sales out by the time he was chairing the Worldcon.
Yeah. So this is all right. So 1974. So in a decade, we've gone from 600 to 3,500 people.
Yeah, and there's arguments about the size of that. There's a long list committee that's responsible for going through as much of the historical record
Hmm.
and figuring out things like who actually chaired the convention. And there's a site with notes, extensive notes. And there's a debate on the long list committee right now because when I was figuring on this, I took a look at the official number in the official Worldcon long list, and it's 3,500.
Okay.
But if I go back to, say, the 1979 souvenir book from the 1979 Worldcon, it lists the attendance there at 4,300.
Oh, interesting.
And the daily newsletter, because conventions in those days would put out a daily newsletter that would list interesting articles and sometimes would list program changes. Although program changes weren't quite that common when you've only got a single track. Um,
Yeah.
um, and it listed as close to 4,500. So it is possible. The contemporary feel was that it was probably closer to 45 rather
Yeah.
than 35 that is now the official list, which is
Mhm.
why the long list committee is in the process of trying to figure out why the official listing changed from
Right.
4,500 down to 3,500 and change.
Yeah.
Yes, it was an incredibly rapid growth.
Yeah.
From 2000 to probably over 4,000 between 71 and 74.
And 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 a change, right? A growth and like weight and significantly more women over that decade. What other changes do you sort of see coming in about that time?
Um, as the convention continues to grow, you're seeing a bunch more professionalism grow into the bidding process, which is
Oh, interesting.
gets selected.
Yeah.
First of all, Worldcons in 63 were selected 1 year in advance.
Hmm.
Um, we went to 2 years in advance when the 69 Worldcon selected 1970 in Heidelberg and
And
1971.
also 71. Yeah. Yep.
Um, but you're seeing a mail ballot introduced because up until then, when you're dealing with a single track, well, the business meeting is just another program item on that single track. So the entire attendance of the convention is welcome to attend the business meeting, and you will select who wins by a show of hands.
Yeah.
Um, but the mail ballot was invented when we were going to go overseas to Heidelberg in 1970. And it was felt that people should be allowed to vote by mail
Mm.
because so many people who would normally go to a domestic Worldcon wouldn't be going to
Yeah.
Heidelberg. So the mail ballot gets invented.
That's interesting. So this is again this kind of idea that um man, people hear the word fandom, and if they have no prior experience, it feels like we're just saying, well, people who like to read a certain kind of book, but it's not just that, right? This is a community where if somebody's doesn't, where someone could be a regular attender, and if they don't show up to a thing, they're missed, right?
Exactly.
Um, and we want to make sure people that can't afford to come to Heidelberg still get to cast their vote, right?
Exactly.
Um, and so and this is still the professionals are all attending, the people who I mean, the Lois Bujolds, or the Misty Lackeys is another one, right? People whose first writings are fan writings often usually go on to produce the professional books. So it's very much a sort of a club or a family or you know, it's
right?
yeah.
And and the professionals are all contributing. I mean, if you look at it, Murray Leinster was the professional guest of honor in '63. And when the committee wanted to go out and get some appreciations written,
Mm,
uh, there were three appreciations in the program book. One was an appreciation of Murray Leinster.
mm,
That's actually his writing pen name. Will Jenkins was his real name. And the appreciation of Murray Leinster was written by Ed Hamilton, who, again, as I say, had been writing since before there was an SF field identified. The
yeah.
appreciation of Will Jenkins was written by John Campbell, who was the editor of Astounding, later Analog, which was the preeminent magazine at the time. And a personal note about uh, Will slash Murray was written by Ted Sturgeon.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
they're a part of the community. So you can go to the editor of the preeminent magazine and
Yeah.
say, "Hi, I need I need an appreciation."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he says, "Sure."
Yeah. So interesting. Um, well, I want to talk about. I think there have been probably some notable changes since, and driven by really big factors. But what else is there that you want to kind of highlight about the evolution of the con scene to that point? Like what else should we know about conventions by 1974?
Well, again, we're at a much more upscale location.
Hmm.
Um, Basically, yeah, we are at a much more upscale location. We are at the Sheraton Park, which later would become the Marriott Wardman Park.
Mm,
Um, we've gotten much bigger. We're using the whole hotel. In '63, we weren't using the entire Statler Hilton.
yeah.
We were using their secondary space. Um, Prices have started to climb. Um, I
Yeah.
mean, as late as '71, you could get a room at the Worldcon for $10. You
Yeah.
don't get $10 hotel rooms nowadays.
No, you have to get arrested to get a hotel that cheap. You have to go spend the night in the pokey.
Exactly.
Um, well, this is fascinating. So it seems to me, and man, I'm going to throw out three real high level bullet points. Um, and I mean, this Worldcon 74, we're talking about 50 years ago. So there's been a lot of history since. But um, on the one hand, it feels like after Star Trek, science fiction and fantasy have just made not you know have made a lot of inroads into popular culture, right? And there have been
Basically, we own the popular culture now.
It's
Take a
crazy
look.
to
Take a
what
look at the
extent that
movie.
is.
Take a look at the movies.
Right, right. So this is interesting because the readers, um, you know, this does not mean that like a million people came to Worldcon last year.
Now,
It's no like
on the
there's
other hand, an awful lot when you include the popular culture effects. You look at San Diego
yeah,
Comic Con,
yeah,
which is, I think it's now Comic Con International or some other name,
yeah, yeah,
but it long since crossed the 100,000 range.
yeah, yeah. And there's probably half a dozen conventions, maybe not that big, but north of 100,000 in the U.S. Right?
Right. Which
Seattle is, Dragon Con probably is. I think Salt Lake.
Dragon's running about 70 right
Oh,
now.
oh, is it okay?
But, it's we've taken over the popular culture,
Yeah.
uh, gaming, which didn't exist really then,
Hmm.
um, has become huge. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Various kinds, right? I mean,
right,
video games, um, but also, I mean, in 1974, you know, something like Dungeons and Dragons was still pretty new. Um, and now there are Hollywood actors who will happily show you their D&D room that they've kitted out. And here's where I
right,
play Warhammer 40K with my minis I've painted, right? That even in
right.
the 90s, that was unthinkable that that would someday be where we end up. There was a time when you counted the volume of Star Trek that existed by the number of episodes. Now I
Right.
don't actually know how many Star Wars spin-offs there are. I have certainly not seen them all, right? And I'm a professional
Right.
in the field, right? But I know I'm always reminded, oh, there was that cartoon Below Decks, and there was Scott Bakula was in one, and right. Um,
Yes.
just Star Trek alone has multiplied hugely.
Right. The amusing part is on the program in 63. There was a half-hour program on Astro Boy,
Oh, okay.
which was, the very beginning of noticing anime in the United States.
Yeah, and now there are whole conventions.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or Ben, this is an experience I've had more than once because I spent about 10 years, well, yeah, I mean the 10 years prior to the COVID lockdowns, I would go to at my peak because I was doing corporate training for an income and I generated a lot of travel kind of points, you know.
Right.
I'd use them to go to cons and I as many as 25 in a year was about the where I peaked. And more than once, I would go into a convention and suddenly I would realize that there were 500 people who were all wearing the same costume and I did not know what it was. And so I'd
Right.
have to stop somebody and say, "You're all wearing a green cape. What are you?" And they say, "Oh, it's Attack on Titan. I'm this character. She's that character. We fight the giants." Like, oh, okay. This, again and again, this has happened to me.
The field has grown enormously.
Yeah.
When I first started, it was hard, but I could read every SF book published.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. No, no way anymore,
no,
right?
no, no,
You have to be Chat GPT to have some to have read them all.
exactly.
Yeah.
It'll lie.
So this is super interesting, right? And there's so here's like another observation, and I want to get to like a big question. It seems to me in recent years that the literary cons that I go to. So I haven't been to a World Con in a few years, but I've been to others. Um, it seems like there is a struggle to try to find a way to engage young people, and not everybody is winning that struggle. Like some of these conventions are just they're not for young people anymore. Um, I don't know. I guess I'd be interested in your thoughts about that. I don't know if that's because young people just aren't reading and the conventions aren't leaning into video games or anime or superhero movies enough to keep them interested. Um, I guess here's the bigger picture is what's the future of Worldcon or these other conventions, right? Because from a cultural point of view, there's a sense in which the Worldcon crowd kind of won, right? They,
Right.
they
And
their hobbies took over.
where it gets tricky is again going back to you can't read everything.
Hmm.
The field is getting fragmented in ways that it didn't used to be. It used to be everybody, we all read the same things.
Yep.
You would go and look at my shelves and you would go look at somebody else's shelves and you would see zillions of books that were the same book.
Yep.
Um, Now, as the field is fragmenting, it's harder and harder for there to be a common dialogue. It's harder and harder for people to say, oh, let's talk about this great new book that I read when the other guy hasn't read that book.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and when conventions have more and more troubles following things like as indie becomes a bigger and bigger fraction of the field.
And there's just more and more of them, fewer gatekeepers or no gatekeepers, and just
Right.
people who would have maybe just been fan writers once upon a time are publishing their novels and putting them on Amazon.
And in some cases, they're publishing their novels and printing zillion and getting zillions of them.
Yep.
You've got an Andy Weir
Hmm. Yep.
who started out
Yeah.
publishing himself.
Yeah. Was rejected by the traditional publishers,
You've got a
published it himself.
JK, you've got a JK Rowling who ended up being published by Scholastic.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
on earth would expect Scholastic to be doing well,
Book about wizards.
it's because nobody else bought it. And
Yeah.
there was an editor at Scholastic that said, I think we can make money off this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and more recently, I think Matt Dinniman's Dungeon Crawler Carl is still a massive hit, and I think they've sold film rights, and that's not only was that self-published, um, the genre, which is lit RPG, was basically discovered outside of the walls of traditional publishers, and I think even outside of the walls of traditional fandom. It was people sort of exploring Amazon's algorithm and finding demand for sort of previously unimagined genres. And said,
Exactly.
we're going to write a book that has the characters in the book have game statistics, and we're going to tell you how their game statistics change over the course of the book, right? No one thought readers would want this, and he's sold a bazillion.
Right. And turned lit RPG into an incredibly popular category.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is interesting, right? Because it's sort of like um I don't know, it's sort of like a dandelion or something, right? Like the dandelion colonizes the field by itself dissolving into spores and blowing away and ceasing to exist, right? Like have the conventions done their thing and they're going to go away now because people have the internet and they can, and travel is cheaper and long distance phone calls are free in the same country. And
I don't know. Um, I think that it is getting harder and harder to find people to bid for a Worldcon
oh, that's interesting.
because it's really hard to run. And
It's probably easy to lose money at too. Someone's got to
it's,
put up some money.
well, I mean, the good thing is that the Worldcons invented pass along funds.
Oh,
So
that is good.
Worldcons that make money pass it
Yeah.
on to future Worldcons, which helps deal with the fact that you don't know how many people are going to show up.
Yeah.
And from an economics viewpoint, since you're dealing with an awful lot of fixed costs, your convention center rental,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to pay for that no matter how many people show up because you're going to have to rent that convention center
You have the center.
long before you know how many people are going to show up.
And presumably at this point, a lot of your headline guests, you're also covering travel and stuff. So you've got thousands of dollars of airfare and hotels for some
So
key
far, for the
players.
most part, Worldcons avoid that.
Is
Just
that right? Okay.
just the guests of honor are the only people
Okay. Okay.
where
So
you're paying
that's
for
limited.
that.
Yeah.
So, you're looking at a few tens of thousands of fixed costs there. But no, the
This is the big one.
facility and the technology. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have just a head table with a couple of mics on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you've got projections and all sorts of other technology,
Yeah.
and that's all fixed cost. And you've got to amortize it out over how many people, and you don't know how many is how many.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and yeah, and on top of that, we haven't even talked about this. You alluded to it earlier on, but there were factions at Worldcon 1, and there have been in recent years more factions, and we've various kinds of controversies have also just added to the difficulty.
Right.
Um,
People decide either voluntarily or involuntarily to step away from the Worldcon.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. What would an optimistic for you? What would be, hey, I would love to see it to go this direction. What would be an optimistic future for the next 10 years for Worldcon in your view?
Um, I think the key there is to see what can be done to attract people from who are part of the SF community, but who are not part of the Worldcon community.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, we have conventions that are successful conventions that have been running for many years.
Mm,
And if you ask how many of you are going to the Worldcon, the answer is very few.
yeah,
What you
yeah,
need to do is identify why those people are staying away and see what you can do to attract them.
yeah. That's
And you
interesting.
need that both in terms of getting more attendees, but you also need that in terms of getting convention running talent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We are living off our seed corn.
Mm,
We have not had the giant influx in many years. We get a steady influx, don't
mm-hmm.
get me wrong, but we haven't had the giant influx in many, many years. And that means that as the giant influx generation gets old and retires,
Yeah.
it's harder and harder to find people interested.
Yeah.
And with the experience to be able to pull off a 10,000 person convention.
Yeah. That's interesting. Um, Feels like this is not exactly the same as, but it's sort of related to maybe some challenges in publishing and literature generally, um, broadening the tent, trying to make sure we're aiming at, you know, everybody, trying to invite all the readers in. Uh,
Right. I mean, how do you get, yes, we got Andy Weir,
yeah,
but you've got an awful lot of indie slash small press people who are generating thousands of readers. What do we do to get their readers to come to the
yeah,
Worldcon or to come to other conventions?
yeah. And not just to come, right? But to your point, to say, this is great, I want to actually make one of these happen. Because
Exactly.
there's a certain kind of risk, sort of a risk any old institution may run, I think, where someone may say, "Oh, this is great. If I can capture a little of whatever prestige Worldcon is good for, great. But I don't want to invest in it. So maybe I'll go and let them honor me, but that's it. Or I will even, um, I mean, you were involved in the recent Worldcon in Chengdu. And there are lots of conversations about that, right? That's a whole other conversation.
Whole other conversation.
Yeah, but you can imagine someone saying, I'm going to have a Worldcon, but really I don't care about Worldcon long term. I just want to show that I can do it. Or I want to sort of have control over the Hugos for a year. Whether or not that's what happened with Chengdu, I'm not saying that, but you can imagine someone doing it, right? Hey, I don't have to, if I have the money. Uh, so it just feels to me Worldcon is a place where, yeah, it needs people who want to come in, who are young, and I say Worldcon, but this is maybe true of a lot of cons, right?
Exactly.
Who want to come support it, be part of it, be part of that community. Um, when some of the things they get out of it, they could also get out of a Discord server, which is free and they don't have to leave the basement.
Exactly. Um, it there are conventions when I started and fanzines, but basically that was the only place that people like me could find other people like me. And you would walk into a convention and say, I found my people.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. The first one I ever went to was they call themselves a symposium. It's called Life, the Universe, and Everything, but it's one of these cons.
right,
And I went to number four. The whole thing was on university campus. My dad was a professor. He saw a flyer. He said, "You might like this." And I went, and I'd have to figure out what year this was, but it's something like 84 maybe, or 85. And it's during the Satanic Panic. So I was pretending not to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I went there and I could not believe people were openly playing D&D, like grown-ups were openly playing, sitting at a table with the lights on, sitting in a chair, openly playing D&D, right? It blew my mind that was a possibility. Yeah, in terms of finding my own people, right?
exactly. that's that magic of discovery. And
Yeah.
we now have lots of places. Conventions aren't the only place you could go to find your people anymore. And long term, I'm not sure how we recover from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Ironic, right? Really successful. The thing that brought these conventions together has culturally triumphed. But maybe in reaching a larger audience and becoming so easy to access, together with other factors, right? The internet's changed a lot of things. Um, and maybe this is maybe conventions are going to become obsolete, or maybe they'll all go back to being local. I mean, I there are some. Um, I believe people still like to see other people face to face. Um, I'll tell you that I once a quarter. There's no organization. I do no work, but I will announce I'm going to IHOP on this Saturday. Any creatives who want to come out, come hang out with me. You got to buy your own food. Nobody's in charge, right? We get between 20 and 50 people will show up for nothing but a tweet. So I think people still want it. Man, I would like to believe we can figure this out, because the conventions, because I've liked them, because I like them. You know, I hope they can find a way to continue.
So do I, and I just don't know if it's going to be possible.
Yeah,
It it's just a scary situation because the incentives the incentives that made fandom happen are for the most part not there anymore.
yeah, yeah. Now there is still some, and maybe Worldcon is maybe a particularly good example. Like you could still go meet a lot of pro writers. You still know, yeah, like I ran into George Martin and Pat Rothfuss were both at Reno. In fact, I drove Moshe Fader to a store to buy a white shirt for George Martin's wedding.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, because he held his wedding off site at that convention.
at the Worldcon, right? So, so
But
uh,
remember that George is a fan.
George is a fan.
He
Yeah,
grew up in fandom.
yeah,
The question is what's going to happen with the writers who did not grow up in fandom?
yeah, yeah. That's it. That's right. That's the question. Yeah. So what's the maybe we should leave people with some kind of an invitation. Um, what's the invitation if someone watches this and and they're saying, "Huh, well that's interesting. I didn't know any of this." You know, probably your average person sort of had a vague sense that there were Star Trek conventions at some point, and then suddenly Comic-Con blew up in the aughts, right? And suddenly everyone seemed to know about Comic-Con, but maybe you're learning for the first time that, oh, there's actually a century of history of um, fundamentally literary conventions, right?
Right.
Um,
And the answer, I think, is what will help us to survive is somebody listens to this and says, I'd like to get involved.
yeah,
Don't don't plan on a Worldcon. A Worldcon's a heavy investment. It's 5 days. It's probably not in your city. It might be. If it's in your city, that changes the
right. Then go because if you don't have to pay for a hotel, then it's really accessible.
right. But wherever you are, there is likely to be a a literary convention within an easy drive and quite possibly within an easy mass transit
Yeah.
of where you are. Uh,
And it should be discoverable too, right? I mean, this
and
is the
there, they're discoverable,
yeah,
and basically go
yeah,
decide, is this for you? If you walk in and say, I found my people, well, you found your people.
yeah, yeah. And get involved. Yeah, I think Ben, I think you're absolutely right. The first step is okay, go try one. Google, what are science fiction conventions in Akron or wherever you are, and yeah, I think if you like it, the convention, the organizations that are running them always need volunteers, so you can get involved and become part of planning out what the panels are going to be, or who we're going to invite as a guest, or managing logistics with the hotel, right? Um, and maybe maybe someday you're running your own convention. Yeah,
Exactly. But get involved and don't start at the Worldcon because price,
yeah,
heavy investment to get involved by
yeah,
starting at a Worldcon. As I say, at my first Worldcon, it was $10 a night hotel rooms.
yeah, yeah. I think it's probably more like 300 a night, even if you're in Reno at this point.
But if there's a local convention, and there is, I don't care where you are in the country, there's a
There
local
is.
convention.
Yeah, yeah,
Go there, have a great time, talk to people, you know, even if you're even if you're a teenage kid at his first convention, people will talk to you.
yeah,
Talk to people and say, these are neat people. I really like this.
yeah,
Let me come back next year.
yeah,
Do you need any help? And just come back. If it suits you, great. If it doesn't suit you, okay, you spent a couple of bucks
right,
and you killed a weekend.
right.
Um,
You'll probably still say a couple things you'll remember your whole life, right? Right. Even
exactly,
right. So it's not for you. Great. You saw whatever. You saw someone
exactly,
you knew. You heard something funny about Game of Thrones. Whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
But that's how we go. That's how the community is going to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ben, thank you very much. I really appreciate you getting on today. I found this fascinating. And I'm gonna go check out the archive and look if I can see if I can get not the topless photos, but maybe some of the 1963 banquet photos to throw in the video when we air it. But Ben, thanks very much to you and to viewers who've been following along. Thank you. Remember that the humans win in the end.